Hi, welcome to another free tutorial Friday, and I'm currently off in Italy at Luca Comics and Games, hopefully showing people the how to draw book. So my assistant Matt asked if I would talk a little bit more about line weight, and so I pulled this page out of how to draw, and you can see it already has a little bit of line weight applied, but it's very, very light. The difference between this and this interior line is quite small. So let's I have two copies of this, and we'll do one, and I also have a couple of different pens we'll try. And so if I was going to go with ballpoint, you could take the classic figure drawing approach, which is what I talked about. This is kind of an add-on to the previous lecture I did on line weight, which was that big roll, and it had the all the various line weight sketches in it. But in this case, I want to actually draw some for you. So or at least increase the line weight. Probably, some of the most important overlaps, and this is typically how I would approach doing line weight, is all about the overlapping. So it's a lot like doing figure drawing. And so you would just say, well, this is a really important element, this whole center engine cowling, right? So that covers our engine and then flows back here into this propeller cone, and then forward, and then we see that, it also overlaps that far side wing. So I'm going to make that nice and strong into here, and I have a tendency also to, as I've mentioned before, add a little bit more line weight to the shadow side of something. So line weight across the top is still very heavy to put it in front of that far side wing, but a little lighter, and to make this one a little bit heavier. Okay, and then right here, this guy crosses over, and this is the support that holds up the engine and connects it to the fuselage. And so I would just fade that, and then nice and heavy here because it's crossing over that wing, and then this could be nice and strong here, heavy, to set up that notch and that overlap. And then here we see the far side wing. I would outline that a little bit, but I don't want it to get as heavy as these two lines. But I still want it to be stronger silhouette. So it's kind of like you have a little traveling background that moves around your shape. And so you vary the strength of that background. You also want to vary the thickness of the line to start to control some of the acceleration of the curves. So if I want to, I'll try to find a nice spot to demo that concept in a minute. So, and you'll see that it's much easier for me to do nice line work if I spin around my piece of paper. So if this was still in a pad or a book, sketchbook, this is how I would do it. Spin it around. Okay, this is the bottom line, so I want to really make that strong. There's a nice accent right there. So let's say I want your eye to rest there for a moment, or be drawn to that accent, and this little form change where this comes along like this, then it snaps right up into the fuselage. So if I want you to see that, I know that your eye is going to go to the point of highest contrast first. So if I add a lot of contrast here, not only in the silhouette, right, with my outline, but also if I take and push this inboard and let it flow onto the fuselage, right, even add a little bit of cross-hatching, then this is going to become very, very prominent, and you're going to see that probably one of the very first things that you see is that form change, because it's such a high contrast moment, and I've thickened the line right where I want you to look. And let's say this I probably want you to see a little bit less, and then it flows into the fuselage. So heavy out here and then fade it back in. Heavy here and then fade. So a lot of thick to thin line weight changes around the form to make it look dynamic, right? Your brain likes to see those thick to thin line changes make something look very alive and dynamic. But most importantly, the overlapping. So you see how this center line of this engine assembly, right, it fades right in there. And I see this is, even if there was a little break, maybe intensify that little break, you could actually stretch this a little bit more to the front if you really wanted to pronounce the center line. And what about this wing? Well, this wing's really important, right, because in this perspective, right, it overlaps a lot of our fuselage. So I want to really make that probably the most dominant line. So it's going to flow out of the fuselage there, and you could even hook that back over a bit. But it gets nice and heavy right through here, underside, again, shadow side, and it's overlapping the fuselage. Okay, so a nice heavy line there. And then on the underside here, but not on the top. So if you wanted to show the end piece, right, this end section, you could make that heavy, maybe a medium weight, just a little bit, but I probably don't go too much. I really want to see the overall silhouette. And if I go too much here, it's going to fight that, and they're really going to turn into one big fat line. So you have to be careful when you get into those small areas, because those two lines can easily become one. And I want to see that form change back there, so nice transition, nice snap at the corner. All right, keep those corners sharp if you want to really make something look right, like it's crisp and has a sharp edge. Keep those sharp. And then when I do this line, it's supposed to be a continuation of this one. So I like to make those about the same weight, right, so that your brain thinks that that line is continuing. And then it will go to the back, to the tail, ends there, and then we've got also another little overlap, just like the main wing, so it fades into the fuselage, and then out here on the elevator, and then the underside, and a little snap back there, stronger, and then just fades in. So it's kind of like, if I look at the tail, I think, okay, 1, 2 for the rudder, and then 3 for the far side elevator. So 1, 2, 3. Those are the planes, not literally airplane, but the sort of depth that I want you to see and perceive just using the line weight. So what I'm going to try and do is the lines that are now the silhouette for the tail, maybe in a little notch right there. You can extend, if you really want to separate that rudder, you could add a little bit heavier line weight, but try not to let it get as heavy as the outside. If you go too far, like I just did right there, you've got to come back and make this a little bit heavier. So it's a progression of weight, okay, to try and set up your overlaps, and you're really hinting at atmospheric perspective. Right, as things get farther away, they're lower contrast, and then this would be a little bit less, so with a very light touch, increasing the silhouette, but not as much as this. Right, and if you want to accentuate those form changes, come back and put a little extra weight right at that snap, and that your eye will go there and see that transition. And the far side wing, a couple little touches on that. And once you've gone heavy with all the exterior silhouette work, you can always come back in to the interior and increase the line weight or add more detail. Okay, so like again, just like the tail, 1, 2, 3 here, 1, 2, 3. So heaviest around there, nice heavy line weight, then sort of medium, and then and we're not talking about big differences, right? We're talking maybe, you know, I don't know, 0.5 millimeter difference or less between this line and that line. So it's subtle, but your eye can pick it up. Your eye is very, very, you know, sophisticated machine, and it can really see those changes. Let's say you're working with a fine tip pen, of a Copic multiliner here. It's a pretty fat pen. How could you do something similar? If you had, you know, this is ballpoint, so you have really nice ability to do thick to thin. So if I was doing something that's a bit more mechanical, okay, what you're going to have to do is, the lightest weight you can do with this pen is the line that I'm drawing. So that sets my light weight. Okay, then what you're going to have to do is come back and double it. So if this is the lightest that I can do through here, you'd want to basically have multiple pin weights, but I only have this one. So if I've done that, the only thing I can do is hit these with like a little bit of a double line. And this pen is not the right scale for this drawing. You can see it's too strong. So this is an example of going too far. So if I want to push that wing on top, you can still make it taper though. Start here fat and then let it taper. And you see now I'm actually tapering towards the viewer, which is maybe, you know, it's contrary to the perspective, except you'd say, well, the line should be fatter here because it's closer to us. Well, in this case, I really want you to see through the middle of the plane. So I really want the heaviest lines near that. And I want you to feel the taper of this in top view. And so I'm actually tapering the line from thick to thin. So it's fat over here and thin over there. Okay? Even though it's contrary, this is closer to us and that's farther away. So you can, there's no hard set rules. You're just trying to control the viewer's eye. Try to get them to look in certain areas and maybe even just wrap that windshield there a little bit. Now, of course, if you wanted to do nice thick to thin line weight that was nice and black, I would probably grab a brush pen. So, but you can see how it's starting to pull that thing together just as a line drawing. It's much easier to see. So if I had let's grab this other copy quickly, and let's take this brush pen. And if I wanted to come back, let's take the sketch down here. Okay, so see if I can just hold it in place. It's sticking up into my light equipment. There we go. I'll shorten it up a bit. All right, so I've got this little sketch, and let's say I wanted to do nice thick to thin. So thin through here, maybe where that touches, and this is where the brush pen works well. And then you can go nice and heavy and just increase the pressure as you get out towards the end. And then I want this little nose cone to overlap. So I'm going to push that. Damn, this is a hard pen to use. Forgotten. Only been 2 days since I've used it. Okay, and then you can overlap that and let that fade inside. I like to put like a couple little dots here and there, and that also is another way to sort of say the line's ending and wrapping around something. So this line would probably go heavy inside there, and then this is going to overlap inside here. So that goes heavy, and then that hole gets darkened up. And this flows out of here nice and heavy, but then it fades before it gets to the far side, and then you pick up the far side and go underneath it. And that's how you get that scoop to look like it has a little radius on it. And then I would fade it as it gets to the back and really push the weight here. This paper does not really like this pen so much. It's bleeding a little bit. But that's the idea, using the brush pen. I'm not going to do much with the brush pen. It's too hard. It's above my pay grade today. If we wanted to do Pilot hi-tek pen, right? This is one of my favorites, the Pilot hi-tek. So it's hi-tek-c made by Pilot, and you can get these in different line weights. So what's nice about this, you can get this in. This is this fat one is the 0.5. Thin one I'm using here, 0.25. I can spin it, 0.25. You can also get a 0.3 and a 0.4. So if we had this sketch, which we saw a couple weeks ago, look how light this line is. And I'd use this light 0.25 for doing flaps, graphics, things like that. So all the interior details, for instance, if I wanted to add more vents, those sort of things, you could really go to town, right, and detail this like crazy without worrying too much about the line weight ever getting too heavy, because it's so fine. Then if you come in with your 0.5, 0.5 is what you'll use to go over the top of this. And if you want to get thick to thin with these pins, you're going to have to just go over the line a couple times and make it go thick to thin like that fat Copic marker or multi-liner we were just using, and then fade. So the fade is a little bit tough. The best fade you can do with a pen like this, right, is always just going to be the line weight. You can get a little taper to it, but it's hard to control. So it's really just best treat it like a single line, and then that's where it ends. And if you wanted to go lighter, you could get really technical about it and use the finer pen at the end, but I tend to just say, okay, light line, heavy line, that sort of thing. Just use multiple pens for multiple line weights, and then thicken it up in a couple of spots. Like here, if I wanted to go underneath, maybe thicken it up. See, I go over the line quite a bit with this pen, and then this is going to overlap and then fade quickly into the fuselage. So I think that about wraps it up. Just a little recap and a bit more drawing and a bit more demo than that previous discussion about line weight with the roll. So I hope that helps you. Using a couple of different pins, a couple of different mediums, right? Little ballpoint, little brush pen, those sorts of things. So next week I'll be back in the studio, and I'm sure I will have tried to figure out on my long flight back what I'm going to do for next week. So have a great one, and draw something. Bye-bye.